a long and very, very informative day and a very productive day on one of the most important topics for the Indian foreign policy and the business establishment, the cooperation between India and Africa. We still have so many of our friends left that shows that we are truly interested in our cooperation. Let me, we have heard a lot about our potential, our opportunities, some of the challenges. I tell you, my first exposure to Africa was in 1983 when I went to Abidjan on my first posting. And when I went to clear my baggage, I was sitting there and all my Ivorian friends were there. And their discussion was going on in French on football. Football is virtually a religion in Africa. And Ivorians were doing extremely well at that time. And suddenly they saw this Indian man and they said, "Ah bon, il est là." So they said, "Why in India you don't play football?" And I was very embarrassed with 1 billion people almost at the time and was struggling to find some kind of a response. Then suddenly, to my rescue came another Ivorian. And he tells him, he said, "Oh, tu connais pas? You don't know. Oh, Indians used to be in the World Cup and they always used to win. And because of their magic, they made 100 goals. Sabut." So I just kept quiet and quietly accepted this fact. But since you know that since 1983 to now, India is no longer talked about simply magic or black magic. It is the magic of our economy. It is the magic of the Indian enterprise that the people are talking about today. And frankly, Africa, I have served in about 8 or 10 countries, one way or the other, either based. But many of the African leaders used to very proudly tell us. For example, General Obasanjo, he was the president of Nigeria. When I met him the first time, within about a week of my arrival as a charge d'affaires or acting high commissioner, he told me, "I know India better than you." And of course, one accepted the fact. And he said, "I'm instrumental of getting all Indian companies in this country," which is also very true. At the same time, he told me something. He said, "And after the federal government, Indian companies are the second largest employers in Nigeria." That was a music to our ears because we are not only creating industry, enterprise, but we are also creating tremendous employment. And that's what makes Indians dearer. It's the story which goes around in most countries. The Indians diaspora is very important to engage. We have not talked about it. It's not a huge diaspora like the Middle East or in the United States. It's about 2 million people. But most of them are big industrialists. They have not gone there. They had gone as indentured labor at one time, but today they are one of the most successful enterprises. And they're not only India specific, India centric. They're Indian by their disposition, attachment to their religion or religious beliefs, but at the same time, they are very, very African in their outlook. Many of them have intermarriages, they've been living there, plus they are global because they have their businesses around. That is an advantage for us. Somehow, we have not been able to tap that particular aspect. But today, we have talked about 3 T's, for example: trade, technology, and training. We have talked about the 3 A's, which we used to always talk about when we spoke about high-tech. Technology, Indian technology, which is accessible and available, which is adaptable for the African needs, and which is affordable. These were the 3 things that we always spoke about and offered. And I always used to tell my friends uh, in Africa that we are we believe in sharing and caring. Having shared the same disdainful past as with the during the colonial times, we do believe that we can grow together. And that is the difference between India and some other countries who are trying to exploit the market. But frankly, we'll reach nowhere if we don't take advantage of that goodwill. Because frankly, that goodwill cannot last forever. People in Africa are impatient. They are impatient for growth. They are impatient for good times once again. They had the bad decades, but now they have come back and they want to hold their future, which is very clearly evident from what they are trying to do through the through the Africa Continental Partnership, their NEPAD, there are all kinds of initiatives that they are taking different, despite their differences. Africa is a kaleidoscope of cultures, a variety of economic models, languages, and their tribal beautiful traditions, which give them a certain strength. When I arrived in Nigeria in 2005, I saw this writer economist report, Nigerians are the happiest people in the world. I was confused. How can somebody be so happy? But when you see them, they are happy just with a small meal and they are happy watching this, they're talking nicely, everybody speaks beautifully, and they're very polite people. So that's what it depends on your barometer of happiness. Today, of course, it's again the Scandinavian countries who have come in this 2017-18 report to be there. But Nigeria, not only Nigeria, but the whole of African continent in 2050, as we have heard this morning, will have almost 850 million of vibrant youth. And that youth will bring about, in my view, this African century to be starting after the Asian, or rather Afro-Asian century, from 2050 onwards. Somebody said that they need to have this or that, but I'm quite sure that they will have that because the continent is rich in resources and continent will be rich in human resources. Now that's what today we are talking. For that, what is important is healthcare and education. And this is the topic of our discussion in this panel. And I have a very esteemed panel of experts here today, policymakers, and my friend Ambassador Ravindra has just returned from Ivory Coast. He has been Africanized also. But before we do that, we have an High Commissioner of Nigeria who is a general diplomat. And I have spoken to him several times. He's a very profound thinker and a strategist. So I would hope that we would be able to listen to so many good initiatives that we can take to nurture this India-Africa and especially India-Nigeria partnership. Floor is yours, Excellency.
The chair of our session today, my good friend, Ambassador Trick, to pronounce Indian names is always a challenge.
Gunayat.
Gunayat, yes, sir. The Joint Secretary, West Africa, Mr. Ravindra. Let me start by saying that I am very happy to be here, particularly for him, and he understands what I have told him. We have a new Joint Secretary, West Africa, and at last we have got one of our own that understands our language. Thank you very much. Mr. Ashok Bajpal, I have is the protocol list that I have on me here. Professor Anita Patanka, Dr. Samita Jadhav, Ambassador Satish Mehta, Dr. Shaktivel Selvaraj, Mr. Sanjay Bharti Kumar, ambassadors, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I came back from Nigeria 2 days ago. I went on the business end of the CII conclave. I went to part of what I went to do was to see Mr. Reddy and to see what specifically were the lacunae still to be addressed so that we can have a successful conclave. And from the briefing he gave me, they have made lots and lots of efforts, and I am very hopeful that we are going to have a highly successful conclave. And I welcome all who are going to be there in advance. I am leaving there. I'm leaving for the conclave before you, and I will be at your service. And I have already told my staff that anybody whose application mentions a CII for visa, that they should give accelerated treatment so that everybody gets his or her visa before the time. The only thing that I said is where Mr. Reddy was still doubting whether Mr. President Buhari would be able to come to address the opening session. And we have gotten in touch with as many people as we can who can shift the letter to his table so that he can consider it. And we keep making efforts. Then many of the people that I talked with, a lot of them, even those who are not part of NASIMA, which is partnering with you, everybody wants to come and see Indian businessmen. You have a very good brand name in Nigeria. So the problem is how to advance the process. I think that's what we're doing here. Now, when I got the invitation on my phone by email, I sent a framework of what I wanted to talk about to him, Mr. Krignayat, and he okayed it. It's only when I came here that I found that I was to be subject specific. So what that then means is that what I have written, which was an overview, I'm going to cut it out because most of the introductions, the statistics, the World Bank projections, the potentials of Africa, the ease of doing business initiative, that African, the interconnectivity and all that, all of them, the institutional capacity building, both what is happening now and the challenges have been addressed. So I will go to read just about a third of what I wrote, and then ad lib, extempore, address a few points which I noted in the course of what we're doing that I think need to be addressed. After looking at the efforts that the Indian government has been making to increase its footprint in Africa and to get closer name recognition in Africa and to get closer to Africans, I said in all this, the government of India has expressed that India's partnership with Africa is based on a model of cooperation responsive to the needs of African countries, demand-driven and devoid of conditions. That's what it's been said here. Africa is appreciative of India's commitment to genuine development partnership, expansion of diplomatic and economic footprint, especially against the background of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, the seriousness of which is shown by the latest forum of Chinese-Africa Cooperation, FOCA, which took place 2 weeks back. And everybody was seeing how much it was dominating the airwaves. India must understand that if you want to look at your operations in Africa from a prism of competition, the Chinese have money, then the Western world have colonial roots and interface, very long-lasting interface with our elite. India has affordable technology, but when you're comparing, you have to build on your strengths and minimize your weaknesses. And I think that a whole lot of people have said it. So it's not a tabula rasa. It's not a blank space. You have to look at your strengths and magnify them, and think outside the box when you have challenges that you think will need innovative approaches. Now, on the Belt and Road Initiative, the African position is to welcome its economic component, but to stay clear of its political and geostrategic controversies. especially since Africa itself is insulated from the geographical areas in contention by the Mediterranean and Red Seas, the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. Uh, uh, Magazines and journalists come to ask me, "Oh, what is the Nigerian take on the Belt and Road Initiative?" I don't need to ask my Minister of Foreign Affairs what our position is. We are insulated. If you look at the map of, we are insulated. So from the continent, from the Asian sub-region, where you are struggling for hegemony with the Chinese. So what we know is that if you have money, you bring it. If you have investment, disposable investment capital, you bring it. We don't care where it comes from, but you must understand that we need development very, very rapidly. And the world needs development because, like the Tunisian High Commissioner said, or ambassador, if the 850 million, projected 850 million youth bulge in Africa, becomes more disgruntled than they are now because they don't have purchasing power, then the whole world is in problem. That is what is leading to the migrant crisis and leading to backlash from the Trump administration that is in turn affecting the Indians through the HB1 visa because we live in a globalized world. So we must understand the interconnectivity of the problems that we all face as a global world. Now, in my view, the imperatives that face India as she seeks to further grow her footprint and business in Africa include, amongst others, one, lessening red tape in implementation of announced lines of credit, two, holding regular business conclaves like the one that CII is scheduled to hold in Nigeria for West Africa between 8th and 9th October, then improving the treatment of Africans in its territory, especially students who will become African leaders tomorrow. This is very, very, very important. We've been talking about technical things, but we're not addressing the human component. Then reciprocating work permits for Africans and giving them opportunities to do legitimate business and thus discourage their engagement in illegitimate activities. Mr. Ravindra is here. 6 Nigerians finished their school here, and they got temporary jobs from international IT companies. Because I think that there is a program that they want to translate to African languages, and then they couldn't take the job because they didn't have a work permit. And then they were told to go to Nigeria to apply. They went to Nigeria to apply, and the application has taken so long, and now the companies have revoked the offer of employment. And meanwhile, in my office, on a monthly basis, we give an average of 500 STR visas to Indians. Now, this must change. It must change because if it doesn't change, then it will become an issue in the Nigerian press. You must have some reciprocity. That is what mutual respect is all about. Now, that of those Nigerian students is gone. We have made all the presentations that we could make, and it went to no effect. But let us hope that the future will be better. Then another one, changing the penchant of Indian businesses in Africa from short-term trading to long-term engagement in agriculture, manufacturing, mining, beneficiation, and adding value to primary products in African products itself. We have talked about it here. Other strategies could include joining the Gulf of Guinea Commission to contribute to fighting piracy in that choke point, which is increasingly affecting Indian sellers. When the retired Rear Admiral, when he made a very honest presentation, and when he was making the presentation, I noticed that somebody was not comfortable with it. But that is how military people speak, and I really enjoyed his presentation because he let the facts there. We cannot make any progress by treating things in a cosmetic fashion. So the Indian sellers, by the way, Indian sellers are ubiquitous now, and Philippine sellers. Every ship of every flag nation, you see Indian and Filipino sellers. So if and the oceans are international trade lines. So if India, it is in India's own best interest, since it's a nuclear power and a global power now, to start to take global responsibility. That's just a summary. Then beefing up the publicity of its activities in Africa, seriously examining the Chinese model of state encouragement to the activities of these businesses in the continent with a view to adopting whatever modified version it may find advisable. Most of heavy business in Africa and in the third world generally is government driven. So the Chinese company, for instance, Chinese do business in Africa through a holding company called CCECC. You know that. So it has subsidiaries that have competence in building ship, building ports, building railways, whatever. So if they are seeking for a contract, for instance, and there is a political component to any major contract, as you know in this place. So if you leave the Indian businesses, if you leave the Indian private sector alone, and you don't give the government support, they will stand no chance. It's as simple as that. So then aggressively promoting Brand India, which already has some level of acceptability there, especially for its relative ruggedness, operability, and affordability of its products by by establishing, assembling, and manufacturing plants which will transfer technology for their maintenance to the workforce in the continent. Mercedes, the ubiquitous workhorse that we had in Nigeria for more than 30 years was the Mercedes 911. In fact, in the whole of West Africa. Why? Because every roadside mechanic could repair it. So if Ashok Leyland, for instance, brings vehicles and sells to the Nigerian market, and the roadside mechanic where the man is, where the driver is carrying the goods, if he breaks down and he doesn't know how to fix the brake pad, they won't come and buy other Leyland trucks. So it is in your own interest to do this kind of capacity building. Then following this route will ease the race to catching up with and perhaps surpassing China, the $200 billion China-Africa trade sooner than later, especially since you have the comparative advantage of speaking the same language. Africa has decided to look east, and that essentially means India and China. And whether it is either of the countries or both countries, they are welcome to operate there so long as they offer attractive terms. What we must be clear about is that no vacuum will exist forthwith. A lot of people looked at Africa, didn't want to do anything with Africa because of the demonization of the continent by the Western press. All of a sudden, everybody has just woken up. And then the Berlin Conference of 1885 is repeating itself now. There's a new scramble for Africa now, but maybe now with some African input. So it is it's a paradigm shift, and you must see it from that way. Now, in tandem, I want to state that the role of programs like ITEC and bodies like ICCR cannot be downplayed in the context of Indo-African relations. However, I should underscore the need for India to enhance her soft power beyond them and Bollywood to match its emergence as a global power. It could consider following a scaled-down version of a model like DFID, JICA, or USAID in Africa. The countries that own those bodies have more visibility in Africa today because they carry their activities within the continent, in contrast with India, which conducts virtually all its training assistance and capacity building projects within India itself. You do a lot of training, but it doesn't resonate because the people who come for that training are only known within the small niches that nominate them to come here. We have President Buhari has been chosen by the African Union as the face of anti-corruption in Africa. Now, what DFID, you said, and whatever do every time is to come and organize capacity building for fighting corruption within Nigeria itself. Now, when you call experts to come here and you give them all manner of teaching, you will spend a lot of resources, but people will not give you credit for that. They have as much credit as they would if you send a team and advertise it so much, because you need brand recognition. Then government of India and business community must also stop believing the one-sided narrative of the Western media regarding Africa. China did so, went ahead to engage with the continent, and is now reaping huge dividends from that bold decision and risk-taking. in particular, they must disregard the newly propagated bogey of, in quotes, Chinese economic neocolonization of Africa. You must put it in context. Our colonial masters sucked Africa dry and left it with no infrastructure to speak of, sowed divisions amongst our people, and encouraged our brainwashed elite to loot the continent and store their ill-gotten wealth in their banks. You know, that is something that that's a historical fact. Now that the Chinese are helping to build our infrastructure, which we need to develop our economies and provide jobs for our youth, the Western media is screaming neocolonization. We should bear in mind that whatever happens at the end of the day, infrastructure once built cannot be taken elsewhere. The Panama and Suez Canals, which were built by Americans and the French, are still in Panama and in Egypt. Hong Kong eventually reverted to Chinese possession after being developed by Britain. And India will not carry the Chabahar port out of Iran. It's not possible. You know, when officers and soldiers of Western armed forces establish and run military training institutions in Africa, there's no problem. But when a few Chinese police officers put on the uniforms of an African country's police force, it is shouted that they have taken over. I'm a product of the Nigerian Defense Academy before I went to Sanford, and the man who established that Defense Academy is an Indian officer. So I don't see the big deal about this. Any attempt to blackmail Africa into abandoning China is not going to work. It will not work. So you just have to brace up to the realities, and then to bring an offer, you know, that is more attractive to the African leadership, because we have gone through that in our colonial experience. Now, the duplicity reaches its zenith in the opposition of Western governments and media to the redistribution of land in Africa, even though it was justly acquired in the first place, and that redistribution is in the interest of economic empowerment of the impoverished majority, and also for the sake of social justice. The PPP model is there for any country that may wish to invest in Africa, and India is not bad for participating. You have your railway. A railway company is the biggest in the world. There is nothing that prevents you from going to any African country and getting a concession to build, operate, and transfer a rail line. There's nothing that stops it. But if you don't do that, and the Chinese company does that, and you grumble, it doesn't make sense, you know. Then the Indian intelligentsia, business community, diaspora, and media should do more to educate their fellow citizens about African positives. This is not out of charity, but to drag them out of their insular thinking and prepare them for a globalized world whose genie has emerged out of the bottle and will not be forced back into it. I am speaking bluntly like this because I think that we are here to identify the problems and suggest solutions, right? Okay. In taking these bold steps, India should leverage on the following facts: that 13 current or former presidents, prime ministers, and vice presidents in Africa attended educational or training institutions in this country. And 6 current or former African African chiefs of armed forces trained in these military institutions. You know, under the popular ITech program, more than 30,000 scholarships have been offered to officials from Africa, from African countries since 2007. That's so many things that India has done. But if you domesticate your assistance more in or some percentage of your assistance in African countries themselves, they will resonate more with the public. Then just 2 more minutes I'm giving. Now, I've talked about African Free Trade Area and the problem that it has. Then I want to talk about the mentioned role of conglomerates like Dangote and Tony Elumelu Foundation and all that. These are the people that you can partner with so that the big industries can look at their counterparts. You know, I would request for 5 more minutes because you are going to Nigeria, and I'm trying to be Nigeria specific now. Then when you talk about higher education, the problems we have in higher education include a problem posed by healthcare includes an incomplete prior diagnosis before patients come to this place. When they are not properly diagnosed, because the diagnosis centers are not up to standard, especially in Nigeria, they come with financial problems because they cannot do enough budgeting. When they come, they find out that they have more sicknesses than they budgeted for. Then the donor compatibility, they want to change. To do organ transplant, and then when they come, they find out that the DNA profiles do not match and things like that. Then you have a visa extension issues. Then you have burdens on missions, like my own mission. It creates a lot of burdens for me. So the possible solution is, I would suggest that if possible, as somebody has said it, building diagnostic centers as part of the teaching hospitals models that we are talking, so that by the time anybody needs to come from Nigeria to this place, then the person is coming for a sickness that has been properly diagnosed and then that can be properly managed. Then when you come to education, you have a problem is internship. You bring people to do professional courses here and you don't give them internship. So they get a lot of theory and they learn virtually nothing in practical application. So I've said that in so many forums that it is very necessary to make this internship mandatory for African students, because that is the only reason. They can do all the conceptualizations online, but it is the equipment and the use of that equipment that makes the difference when they come to this place. Then incomplete information about hidden charges before the students come, incomplete information about the potential attitude of the populace to the students themselves. So they come and they are not psychologically equipped to meet what they are coming to face. Then FRRO is a very, very big challenge. So I've talked severally about it, including to the Joint Secretary of West Africa. Then so the solution, including building centers of excellence in Africa, and then finally, the other day we went to review the implementation of a line of credit. The implementation of a line of credit in two projects in Nigeria, some other projects in other countries, and one project in Nigeria which is taking place in Kaduna. They came up with two companies. One is Bharti Demand that just left here, right? What's the name of the company? Bharat. Okay.
BHEL.
Yes, BHEL. BHEL is doing the project with Skipper, and then they call it a consortium, but they're doing it as a consortium, but their planning processes are parallel. So what is happening is that you complete one process with Bharat, and the other process is not completed with Skipper. So if you want to form consortia to execute projects, you have it. You try to have it in a vertical arrangement, so that one company will be the lead company. And lastly, the protection of the name brand India. We have a company called Ajaokuta Steel, which was nearly completed in 1983, and the politics and the economics and corruption, grounded it. Then sometime, in the early 2000s, an Indian company called Mittal was given the job to go and resuscitate the company, and they did a very terrible job. The only thing that anybody remember is that an Indian company went to Ajaokuta. Until now, you can Google Ajaokuta. Till now, Ajaokuta is only now that they are starting to bring Ajaokuta back on stream. So please, any contract that has very high visibility that can affect your brand, please let the government not seek and say that it does not concern them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for a very precise and direct message, which is very useful, especially the solutions that you have recommended. And I'm quite sure that the ministry will be looking at that. Now, I know the Apollo Hospitals is here, my friend Dr. Ashok Bajpai. And we have heard of Apollo since 2003 in Africa. They've been consulting in different areas. So I would now leave the floor to Apollo Hospitals for giving what are their plans. But kindly take 5 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Trigunayat, all the fellow panelists and dear friends. The panel, of course, is about education and healthcare, and I will focus on healthcare. My name is Ashok Bajpai. I'm the Managing Director of Apollo Hospitals. And as Ambassador Trigunayat mentioned, we have been the pioneers for healthcare in Africa since the early 2000s. And it was Dr. Reddy and his vision to bring healthcare not just to Indians but to people around the world. That has now had literally thousands of residents from Africa coming to the Apollo Hospitals group, not just in Delhi but in Chennai, in Hyderabad, and in other hospitals, for an amount of care that ranges from diagnostics all the way to organ transplants. It is a responsibility that we take very, very seriously, and we do also understand the difficulty with which these patients and their families come to India, because they are literally here to save a loved one's life or to save their own life. So it is very, very difficult for this to happen. Um, I think if you just look at it from the patient's point of view, we will begin to see a very different picture. We can look at medical tourism, we can look at revenues, we can look at patient flows, but what I care about is the ease with which the patients can come and by which they can be treated in this country. Now, first of all, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have, and many times it is the ambassadors, the Indian ambassadors on the ground that must reflect this both to the ministry and as well as to the Ministry of Civil Aviation, that direct passenger connectivity from countries in Africa must be established with India. What I have seen is that those countries that have direct flight connections are able to actually bring about a great deal of help for patients and their families to come to Delhi or Mumbai or Chennai or Hyderabad for treatment. Imagine, I mean, if you have to catch a flight from any country in Africa, stop somewhere either in the Middle East or in Europe, wait for 4 hours with an ailing patient, then catch a second flight, then come 6 to 8 hours to Delhi, then take 2 hours to reach a guest house, then check in the next morning to the hospital. It is something that that simply doesn't work. Now, of course, there is economics that is a role to play, but I guarantee you the numbers are there that there will be a direct flow of not just medical, but other economic ties that happen along with air travel. So we must connect. I think that is very, very important. The second thing is the visa issues that the ambassador from Nigeria also mentioned. I have actually, unfortunately, had to see that our embassy in Nigeria has begun to be very, very careful with the medical visa applications for the simple reason that there was some abuse of that, and there were some people who were coming in who were not actually patients or attendants. However, that is a minority. The vast majority of people are genuine patients who are waiting for their visas. And I think we must be able to separate the wheat from the chaff very, very easily. Thirdly, I think we must look at the fact, I have raised this with the government, with the civil aviation, as well as the tourism minister, that the fees for medical visas do not promote any medical tourism for India. We are doing ourselves a disadvantage by charging several thousand rupees, which is, a few $100s from patients who are just coming here to get an organ transplant or to save a loved one's life. The amount of revenue that we generate from medical visas is probably minuscule, but the amount of trouble that we give to the patients is very large. So therefore, we must be able to streamline this. And I think that has been looked at very, very favorably. On one side, we are trying to promote medical tourism. We are trying to say that, yes, we are a caring nation. And then if you just look at the small amount of money that a tourist visa would get from Africa, I think we need to change that. So therefore, I think there are some very quick fixes to make changes. We don't have to make very huge changes of policies and heads of state to meet together. There are enough people here, and there are enough people at the ambassadors level that will be able to take these small things forward that will have a very big change. And let us not underestimate the power of these small changes and the impact it has on flows of patients. But there are great things that are happening currently. Now, Apollo Hospitals itself is getting over 30,000 patients a year from Africa. It is absolutely tremendous the amount of faith and the word of mouth and the brand of not just India, but of the various private hospitals in India. that carries a lot of weight, and that is the first destination. We also have established specialty clinics in Kenya, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Tanzania, as well as the Ivory Coast. I believe there are some there as well. We have agreements with various countries. So, with Tanzania, the Ministry of Home of Botswana, the Ministry of Home of Zambia, and the Ministry of Defense of Tanzania. So, we have not just people, but governments who are also providing a lot of faith to places like Apollo, saying that yes, we do agree that not just our citizens, but our bureaucrats, our defense officials require quality care and we'll send them to you. It's a very healthy relationship that we have been able to develop over time, and it is built on faith and trust. We will go the extra mile to make sure that we continue to have that faith and trust with these respected governments. Uh, we also have training and observership programs. The Ministry of External Affairs of India has started a special observership program in association with Apollo for doctors, nurses, and paramedical staff for various African countries. And the External Affairs Ministry is taking care of the air tickets and pays them around 45,000 rupees a month for attending these trainer and observership programs in various countries in Africa. So there is also a lot of support that is given by the Ministry of External Affairs, and we must recognize that it is always a continuous improvement process. Now, going forward, and I'll come to the last part of my talk, which is the opportunities. Now, currently, we are looking at patients who want to come to India for treatment. That cannot sustain forever, and especially with a nation like Nigeria, for example, which has a large number of incidences of cancers, which has a large incidence of cardiac diseases as well as organ transplants, we cannot expect everybody to be able to afford the journey here. So, therefore, we must look west, as the ambassador was saying. If Africa is looking east, India must also look towards Africa to see what we can do to partner and develop there. So, some of the opportunities that I'm looking for now is the ability to do on-site surgeries with selected partners in Africa. I'm very happy to send my surgeons for a period of 4 to 6 days and to be able to have some basic surgeries done there. I don't want patients from Africa spending money on transportation, on accommodation. I'd much rather have them spend that money on medicines and the hospital. There's no point in just traveling back and forth. So why not send my surgeons there? Very happy to do so. So I would request our ambassador from Nigeria also to see if we can find some partner hospitals in your country, sir, and of course in various other countries in Africa, where we can have the post-operative care as well to the standards. Oftentimes, it is not the surgery that is the problem; it is the post-operative care and the possibility of infection that happens after that that we need to worry about. I'm looking for partners that can maintain that standard, and I'm very, very ready to take that forward already. Uh, my pleasure. The second thing I would like to do is the fact that there are many countries in Africa, whether it is Rwanda, Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and others, that don't have basic diagnostic facilities yet. So while we are talking of surgery, there are countries there that cannot do a CT or an MRI or a PET scan. And some of the first machines are now coming in to Africa as we speak. And the Aga Khan Hospital, for example, is setting one up soon, I think, in Kenya. But the cost of that is almost 2.5 times. The pricing of that is about 2.5 times of that in India. Now, I believe there is an opportunity to actually go to basic diagnostics, your simple blood tests, your simple kidney and liver function tests. The worst thing you want to do is get misdiagnosed in Africa that you need an organ transplant. You fly to India and everything is fine, and you could be solved by antibiotics. That has also happened to people. We are very happy to send them home, but I personally feel very bad that they spent several $1,000s to come and take some antibiotics from us and go back in 3 days. So I do believe there is a great opportunity for us to actually partner in creating diagnostic centers there, in sending our ownership there as a joint venture with our African partners. And the third thing I would like to propose is joint ventures, a collaboration to operate and manage African hospitals. So, if India has been able to develop such a thriving private healthcare business with excellent standards of care that rivals those of the West, then we can do the same in Africa. We can go there, we can operate, we can manage, we can set the standards in an environment of a developing country. This these amazing hospitals in India have not developed by magic. They have developed over 35 years of hard work. In the 80s, there was no private hospital here that could do the sort of transplant surgeries or the difficult surgeries that we do today. It has not happened by magic. It has happened by finding protocols, by controls, by getting the equipment, by training people. And we need to do that in Africa, because perhaps African hospitals today, by and large, are where Indian hospitals were several decades ago. And they have to make that journey as well. If we have learned and we have got the ability to manage and operate such hospitals, would very happily transfer that skill and talent to Africa as well. So I see a very, very positive future for healthcare in Africa. I think it's a great opportunity to happen. I think trust and belief will take us a very long way. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vajpayee. Thank you. May I now request Ambassador Ravindra to take into account what has been said and state India's Africa policy.
Good evening to all of you. Ambassador Anil Trigunath sir, His Excellency Nigerian High Commissioner, and my fellow panelists. I will be very brief in my remarks. I know we are to catch up with time. The session's topic is economic cooperation, opportunities and challenges, focusing on higher education and healthcare. In my remarks will be basically in two parts. In the beginning, I will share sort of perspective from the ground, particularly from West Africa region, where I served as Ambassador of India to Cote d'Ivoire last 2 years. And before that, 10 years back in Libya as a junior diplomat under Ambassador D.P. Srivastava sir, who taught me ABCD of diplomacy. Basically, that will be the perspective from the ground. And also later, I will very briefly, I will touch upon an initiative of Government of India to promote education and medicine, basically continuous medical education, teleconsultations as well, which I am in charge now. Our bilateral relations with all these countries in Africa are very cordial. We have no major political issues. We have very high level regular contacts and visits, particularly last 3-4 years. It has gone up exponentially in terms of interactions. We see here Africa in foreign policy very predominantly now. All these countries also accord very high importance to India. They all know the importance of India, the kind of technological developments we have achieved in the last few decades, particularly in health sector and of course education. All of them vote for India's candidature in UN elections, which is not even USA can think of. Big countries like even China, I know sometimes loses out to India when it comes to UN elections and garnering votes from Africa. And they also support our claim for the permanent seat in the expanded Security Council. Our trade with Africa is on the rise. Currently, we are in the range of around $65 billion, which for a continent like Africa and India looks, quite small. We need to target more. If you look at West African countries, we have a total trade of around, it's approximately around $30 billion. Most of the countries are politically stable. There's in the recent years, there has been no instability in none of these countries. All these countries have a young population. Around, I think, if you look at whole of Africa, 22 million of the population is in the range of 15 to 24 years. Literacy rates are going up, and economy in most of the countries is growing fast. If you look at the number of countries, top 10 countries, where the economy is growing at the rate of 8 to 9%, most of them are from Africa, and a few from West Africa as well, including Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, and of course Ghana, Nigeria, of course. The existing infrastructure in education in Africa apparently is not been able to meet the increasing demand. The story is the same in health sector as well. Existing facilities are not adequate. There are very few super specialty hospitals, though efforts are being made. Thus, opportunities in higher education and the health sector in Africa, particularly in West Africa, are abundant. Our educational institutions and hospital groups are making very good efforts. We heard from Mr. Bajpayee of Apollo how they have managed to get 30,000 patients in a year from Africa. But if you look at the patients from where they are coming, they are mostly from Anglophone countries. Very few from Francophone countries, they travel to India. Again, language is a barrier. Many of them have traditional links with French colonies. And if you look at West Africa, they all travel to either Tunisia or to Morocco, sometimes to France itself. But we are doing reasonably well in education. Number of students from West Africa who are studying in India is on the rise. Pune and Bangalore have become sort of well-known names in Africa. Apparently, when I was in Cote d'Ivoire, whenever I used to say I'm from Bangalore, I used to come across many who had traveled to Bangalore for studies and for some other purposes. Ease of connectivity is playing an important role, though we don't have direct connectivity between India and Africa, except for Addis Ababa, Kenya, and perhaps Rwanda. We need to have this as soon as possible. I was interacting with the Nigerian High Commissioner a few weeks back, and he was telling me that there is a possibility of direct connectivity between New Delhi and Lagos, and this is going to happen very soon. In terms of investment in health sector in West Africa, or for that matter, Africa, we have not done anything significant. We have very few initiatives. We have like in Conakry, Guinea-Conakry, which is in the far western corner of Africa. We have a Delhi-based hospital group is setting up a 200-bed hospital in Conakry, and there have been very like small attempts. So when it comes to health and education sector, we have made some progress, but there is still a long way to go. Now let's talk about the challenges. This is again based on my experience in Cote d'Ivoire and Libya. First is the strategy. Our educational institutions and hospital groups must have long-term strategy. A visit to the capital in African capitals for 2 days or meeting with a few people may not yield result. One must engage with the concerned departments, agencies, universities, hospitals, understand their constraints, understand their limitations, how they work, and find ways and means to develop a business. When I was in Cote d'Ivoire, I used to tell them, please visit the place as many times as possible in the beginning. This is when you have to develop trust and confidence. If possible, invest a modest sum by setting up, as rightly pointed out by Apollo representative, diagnostic centers, which is a wonderful idea, through which you can earn a lot of goodwill and at the same time trust and confidence, and help them to build a capacity. I've seen pharma companies sponsoring visits of delegations to India to their facilities, and it has really worked very well for them. Similarly, several hospital groups are offering short-term refresher courses for medical doctors. We heard from Mr. Ashok Bajpayee on that. One should also think of if you are looking at investing, let's say 10 million or 20 million in Africa for in health sector. We have various instruments. LOC project, LOC is line of credit is one such instrument. If line of credit if the gestation period is more, and you can also look at buyer's credit. Hospital groups can have agreement with the host government and then seek buyer's credit. That is, again, I have not come across any example where health sector taking buyer's credit in Africa. That is something which people should explore. Second is identifying a partner, a reliable partner to work with. This is again requires a persistent efforts. Any partnership in order to work has to be mutually beneficial. This is an area where our companies struggle. If you look at West Africa, as I said, they have traditional links with French, erstwhile French territories. Again, in West Africa, you have significant number of Lebanese population. So they control the business. They control, if you look at the trade, and significant amount of investment has also been made by Lebanese businessmen. So they tend to look at Tunisia, Lebanon, or Egypt, or Morocco. So this is a barrier which our companies have to break, and this can only be possible with a persistent effort and long-term strategy. Third major barrier, particularly in francophone countries, is the language. But again, knowing local, I wouldn't say it's a major barrier. I take back my words, but an impediment, I would say. Knowing local language eases your work. It is therefore important to send representatives who speak French to francophone countries. And I've seen in Cote d'Ivoire, in Conakry, those who speak French used to do very well in business, both in education sector as well as in the health sector. So this I thought, perspective from the ground, and now coming back to headquarters where I'm serving currently since last 2 months. Let me say a few points about Vidya Bharati, Arogya Bharati network project, which MEA is implementing in collaboration with TCIL. This is the project which we are focusing on enhancing brand India in education and health sector in Africa. This project is primarily a technological upgrade and extension of the Pan-African e-network project, which was implemented in 48 partner countries across Africa from 2009 to 2017. The phase 1 of the project was successfully imparted teleeducation and telemedicine by linking educational institutions and hospitals in India with those from the participating countries. The new version of this project in the next 5 years will provide free tele-education courses in various academic disciplines to 4,000 students every year from African countries. Project will also be utilized for providing free continuing medical education, around 1,000 every year, to African doctors, nurses, paramedical staff. Further, Indian doctors through this project will also provide free medical consultancy to African doctors who seek their advice. It's an ambitious project. We have signed an agreement with TCIL a few weeks back. So we are going ahead with the implementation. It's a top priority for MEA, not just MEA, for Government of India. We are hopeful with the cooperation of African countries as well as universities. We will be successful in this endeavor, and this will definitely be a game changer when it comes to branding India as a destination for education and health sector in Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Ravindra, for putting into perspective the GOI efforts. Now I would request Professor Anita Patankar and Dr. Sumita Jadhav of the Symbiosis Institute of Health Sciences and Symbiosis School of Liberal Arts. Please restrict it to 5 to 7 minutes.
5 minutes each, right?
7 minutes, 3.5 minutes each.
Oh God.
Thank you.
Okay. You're saying that to a professional teacher, so this is very difficult. So then let me just get into bullet points. I think there are a couple of things that the Government of India needs to get. And I think there are a couple of things that our partners need to get. There are certain similarities between the higher education system in India as well as Africa. Maybe we're a couple of decades ahead of them on the learning curve, but otherwise, when you look at the challenges that African nations face, they all resonate with me. I started teaching 36 years ago, and those are all problems that I still see in many areas. India has pockets and islands of excellence. So you have your IITs and your IIMs and a few NIRF top hundreds, but otherwise the vast majority still suffers from a large number of problems. In both the places, we cannot deny the fact that the private sector needs to be integrated into activities, whether it's African nations or whether it's India. And I think India does not have a very good experience in terms of a level playing field for private sector as well as public sector. But the reality is that in both the places, 60% or more of college going youth are going to go to some kind of private educational initiative. And therefore, that is something that government policy will have to push for. The second thing is, and I like what the Excellency said, if you were a student in my class, I would be in love with you. Absolute honesty while not getting afraid of being politically incorrect. The reality is that there is competition and there's competition everywhere. But the pie is so big that you actually don't have to worry about competition. So we should actually be very proactive. And I think the first step for India is going to realize that all educational institutions in India are not interested in going to Africa. And they shouldn't be interested in going to Africa also, because there's a huge youth population in India that does not have access to quality higher education. Therefore, out of the hundreds of universities and thousands of educational institutions, the government will have to pick and choose. Some, like Symbiosis, are genetically predisposed because we were set up for African students. But all the others were not. They might be interested in it because it gives them a comparative advantage. They might be interested because global rankings give them marks, or they might just be good human beings. But everyone's not interested. So therefore, selecting those that are, and then partnering, and this is my fix number one, to borrow Dr. Bajpayee's language, we need to look at a separate kind of public-private partnership. The twin sisters, I come from Pune. Pune has, I think, the largest number of foreign students, of which a large number are from Africa. We're a twin sister, for example, for Bremen in Germany. And ever since we became twin sisters with Bremen, the number of German collaborations, the number of German MOUs and active initiatives in education, in business and manufacturing has gone up. Maybe it's time to think out of the box, because while mobility will keep on increasing, everyone's offering scholarships. So therefore, student mobility is going to increase. Unfortunately, it's going to be one way. So a larger number of students are going to be interested in coming from African nations to India. Faculty mobility, luckily now there's interest both ways, okay? Because again, there's a great learning to be had. But beyond the collaborative research and beyond the mobility, I think it's time to be a little creative. So probably we need to look at, one Indian corporate, one Indian university, one chosen African city, and then work together. So how cool would it be, for example, we have about 2,000, maybe 1,500 African students studying with us. If Apollo Hospitals, for example, decided to interview them here in India, as soon as they finish their program, okay, which is relevant to what Africa requires, and we will take their inputs for the curriculum. But they go back home after having completed a degree, knowing that just like the Indian kid who goes to an MBA institute and gets a pre-placement offer, he gets a job in Africa as well. And it's great for people like, and we are in talks with Kirloskar as well as with Godrej, because they hire in Africa. So we've reached out to them and they're very interested. I hope Apollo Hospitals would also be keen at least to look at what we offer and the curriculum we offer. So I think we need to be a little creative in terms of looking at that. I think we also need to look at ways in which to partner. I think joint activities for teacher training, for collaborative online resources. I think creating MOOCs is something that we are struggling with in India. The quality of MOOCs is not that great. Africa also is learning. And Africa, we can actually learn a lot. For example, the Association of Indian Universities is setting up an online portal for internationalization called the Indian Network for International Educators. And guess what? It is based on the African Network for International Education. So there is a lot to learn, and therefore, I think a lot of joint activities. So what we call collaborative intelligence as an academic, that you share resources, you share priorities, you share limitations, you share material in such a way that you equip students to deal with local realities as well as international. Because I think that's what India wants, and that's what Africa wants as well. Is that our students should be able to get jobs within our country, but they should also be competent to travel abroad if they so please. So that is something that I think we can look at. The middle class is growing in both the places, and they are looking at education as an investment. And therefore, this is something that bodes well for higher education. 21st century skills are something that both are going to require. As an academic, I get scared when people talk only about STEM, because the rest of the world knows that economies that focus only on STEM and don't pay attention to the humanities and the social sciences and the arts and the language and literature, what happens to the quality of life in those societies. So that is something that we can look at. Definitely joint academic auditing systems. I think both Africa and India struggle with quality and relevance of programs. I mean, Ratan Tata very famously said that 80% of Indian engineers are unemployable. Now, what does that say about the quality? So you have a degree. I think the same thing. So access is one issue, but quality and relevance of material, of curriculum, of learning is equally important. And I think we can partner there in creating academic monitoring systems. I think we need to stop looking at Africa as, requiring our help, and rather look at them as learning partners, and that we will be able to learn, for example, faculty development program, a lot of skilling programs, which is what India needs. Like I said, MOOCs, online, EdTech, academic auditing systems, research and innovation centers and incubation hubs, entrepreneurship. We are already working actually with CII in doing entrepreneurship workshops for African students, so that they go back and are able to set up stuff. Linking education to employment. I'm going to wind up really fast, but the government needs to steward this, and we need to think out of the box. And ultimately, and I'd like to end on this: what happens in Vegas never stays in Vegas, and therefore, every African student that comes here and the experience that he has, whether it's with FRO, whether it's with racial discrimination, whether it's with an unfriendly city or unfriendly police, goes back and helps in developing the brand of the country. And therefore, we need friendlier cities, and educational institutions need to work with that. Samita.
Sorry, but we'll.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
His Excellency, the Nigerian Ambassador and the Commissioner, and my fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first thank the Institute of Vivekanand International Foundation and CII for inviting me here for a topic that is very dear to my heart, that is enhancing the India-African cooperation, especially in the health sector, because not only am I a doctor, I have been working in the education field, skilling in the healthcare field, and also have been visiting Africa right from countries like Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi, and Rwanda. Coming to Rwanda, in the morning, actually, His Excellency Mr. Ernest Rama Nisiua, he spoke about how the country has developed. And I myself I've seen what has happened in Rwanda. Actually, the present president Kagame, he through the Tutsis as well as the moderate Hutus, and the economy was completely in shambles. The healthcare system was absolutely at a loss. And there was such a lot of foreign investment, but they didn't really, they don't really keep on taking the foreign investment, but they have themselves, they have developed an internal system where now they have become self-sufficient. And if you really go to the museum and the memorial site where about 100 million, the Rwandese are lying there, your soul is going to be shattered. But there is something to learn, and in fact, I've written many articles on what India can learn from Rwanda. Now, we always talk about the African countries, partnering with India and learning from India. Why not learn from the African countries? Because there is a lot of history of colonialism and the growth, especially in the healthcare sector as well as in the education sector. Now, coming to India, we are in the present stage of the Ayushman Bharat, which is the Pradhan Mantri Arogya Jana Yojana, and it has been recently launched last week at Ranchi. And this was an ambitious task, which was actually started at the beginning of the year, but it has really come into fruition now. In fact, consider a case of Mr. Amit Kumar, who has, 3 years back, he has delivered, his wife has delivered a baby, and in a small little village in Indri in Haryana, where the wife developed complications, and he had to shell out a bill of 1.5 lakhs. But 3 years later, this August, when his wife delivered a pretty little girl, and they called her Karishma. You know why? Because they did not have to pay at all. And it was only 35 rupees, and that too for a birth certificate. So that is the change. And we are a country where there is a game changer attitude of the people of India. And we need to go by the Prime Minister's statement of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. That the terminology of Sabka Saath is extremely important, because we want the healthcare sector to come together. We want the medical technology institutes coming together to develop and to hike up the skilling of the not only the doctors, because actually because of the advanced technology, what is happening is the medical technology industry, they are the ones who are actually coming into the training sphere, and they are absolutely spending a lot. This is regarding the private sector. Now, what about the public sector? As we all know, India is just spending 1.25% of the GDP, which is a absolutely woeful condition in India. And it is the public system is obviously underperforming. However, how optimistically IBF report has stated that by 2020, India would produce 100 million US dollars in healthcare, and within a decade they have mentioned, and the report states that it will be 280 million. So we are really at the right time. Africa and India need to partner to not only for the growth of the infrastructure in healthcare, but the healthcare skilling. The healthcare skilling is not only at the top of the pyramid of medical doctors, but it is the nurses, it is the spine of the healthcare is the medical technologists, the allied health sector, where I've been to Africa, I've been to Nigeria, sir, where we have absolutely people are dying of kidney diseases, and there is nowhere, there are no trained technologists who actually can go to the home of the individuals and just give them a hemodialysis which can save a life. Why do they really have to come to India, sir? We train these people who are they are the people who are can be trained. Now, coming to the again African continent, there are about 200 million students of age group of about 15 to 24, which is a demographic dividend similar to what we have in India. I mean, this is something that we need to look at. And in fact, by 2045, this number is going to double. So I'm talking about numbers all the time, because even in India today, we require about 65 lakh allied health professionals. Where are we have not even started skilling. The health sector skill council has started taking tiny steps, but actually at the ground level, can we see any change? Other students coming from the rural area or even in the cities, are they even coming for healthcare skillings? They are really not, because we are an institution where we have an affiliation of health sector skill council. And of course, what are we doing at a higher education? We are doling out, in fact, degrees at the BSc level, at the MSc level, and we are looking at the metropolitan cities, and these people are actually getting absorbed in the medical technology industry, sir, as application specialists. This is also the need of the hour. It is not only the hospital sector that is going to absorb such kind of people. So the partnerships right at the education level, and welcoming African students here. And sir, you also mentioned about internship. Our institution, I can proudly say that we have internship on a routine basis. So 1 week they are in the hospital, so 1 week they are in the on the campus. And we do give summer internships where all the hospitals in Pune city, and of course out of Pune, even Delhi, they are absorbing our students and welcoming them. We give them a beautiful induction program where the African culture should match with the Indian culture, and they should be welcomed by our the citizens of India, where they come from all parts of rural India, and they should be comfortable with them. So we are also trying to change the mindset of the students. So it's very important, sir. Please give them opportunity to come here and study. There are 50,000 scholarships that Africa has already announced. Symbiosis International University has also announced scholarships for the African continent. I'm working for I'm a regional representative of Africa. However, unfortunately, sir, I was interacting with some of the alumni out here, and the alumni, they don't even know about our university. So in fact, internationalization is the DNA of our institute. And however, it was quite depressing, that they don't know about the institute. And the I think the policymakers in Africa, they need to find out the best institutes in India, and where the international diaspora is welcome. They are having certain policies in place and certain comfort level, as Anita ma'am has mentioned. I mean, why not welcome the students in the houses as well as on the campuses in the cities, and let us not really fear of one odd incident that is happening to a Nigerian students and vice versa. In fact, a lot of people told me not to visit Nigeria. They told me not to visit Rwanda. And in Tanzania, I was not allowed to even cross the road alone. I had somebody from the the organization to accompany me. But I really I did not face any problems, and I'm so happy that the comfort level again has come between Africa and the Indian, the people, and this is absolutely a welcome sign. I think nodding, so I need to stop. So thank you so much.
Ambassador Satish Mehta has been very patiently waiting. And I know our Jaipur foot is something which is one of the most amazing selling points for India. And I have seen in Nigeria, when some camps were done, that 100-meter race, these people who are fitted with, within 3 months' time, they were able to run with that. So that's something amazing.
Okay, they do.
So we have Ambassador Satish Mehta.
Prosthetic. Oh,
It's called Jaipur foot.
oh, really? They know Mr. Pistorius, right?
You in South Africa.
Excellencies, could I request all of you to come here, please? We do Jaipur foot. Unfortunately, we still don't do Jaipur neck. And since I don't want you to clean your necks and wash this, I'll request you to come right there. And also make it easier for others to see.
Oh, thank you.
You've been going through some very insightful presentations, and obviously I can't match the erudition or the level of quality of presentation. So I'll start with some visual. It's a small visual, so just bear with me, and then I'll quickly flip through PowerPoint presentation. It won't take very long. Could you start this, please? I bet none of you can walk run as fast.
The stump is measured at the groin level and an eyepost brim of the size is selected. This brim is sleeved over the stump and fixed on the stump. A POP bandage is wrapped around the stump. The interior and lateral alignment axes are marked and the whole negative cast with the brim is removed. The socket provided by these brims are of Ischel containment variety, the most advanced socket system in the world. This negative mold, along with the brim, is fixed on the wall frame and is centered as per alignment lines. The alignment is confirmed with the laser alignment system and then filled with the POP paste. This finished mold is taken to the draping room where it is fixed on a vise. The HDPE pipe is heated in an oven, and when it becomes malleable, it is sleeved over the positive mold. As the HDPE pipe cools down, it takes the exact shape of the positive mold. The POP is removed from the socket, and the socket is finished by removing any extra material and rounding of the edges. The socket is again fixed on the wall frame. Interior and lateral aligned lines are confirmed and remarked, and the axis of the knee is determined and marked on the socket. The joint and pre-formed shank piece are fixed to this socket. A Jaipur foot and belt is fixed on it and given to the patient for trial. Any problems in the gait of the patient are observed and corrected, and the limb is given to the patient.
The new, more unique media attention. Popular television and cine actress Sudha Chandran, who lost her leg in a train accident in 1981, was among the many who benefited from this.
Like I was just reading magazines, and this beautiful foot, just caught my attention because it was very natural. So I went deep into it and just read it. I said, what is this? I was fortunate enough to meet Master Ji and D.R. Mehta sir. I wrote to them and they said, yeah, please come over. I went there and that's how I got the Jaipur.
Sudha Chandran went on to give even greater publicity to the Jaipur foot through the film Nache Mayuri. She played herself, a dancer struggling to dance with an artificial foot. The film was a big hit.
If you could just put the PowerPoint presentation. Thank you very much. I know the quality of film is not very good, but let me explain to you. And you'll understand why. First, we are a charity. And we do not charge a single penny, no matter who comes, for any service we render. And that includes my mother. My mother lost a limb. She lost her leg above knee to cancer 28 years back. And she got it there free. I mean, we donate what we want to, and we've been doing so, but that's a different story altogether. So this is based on a very noble idea that those who have lost limbs should neither lose their mobility nor their dignity. And that's what we work on. As compared to International Red Cross, for example, where the administrative charges are about 63%, our administrative charge is about 4%. The entire leadership of Jaipur Foot is volunteer. We do not take a cup of tea there. Well, we don't even serve a cup of tea to anybody, including presidents, prime ministers, no matter who come. It's very clear because it's a matter of trust with you. Those who donate us, they donate for limbs. They do not donate for a cup of tea for me or for our visitors. So this film is a little old. We have been rehashing it. Now we have found one of the world's best ad man who happens to be from the same school where I come from. And he has said he will do something much better. And of course, it will be free of cost. Now let me come to a little presentation on this, and I'll tell you what we are doing in Africa and what we'd like to do in Africa. Next slide, please. Maybe I can do it with this. Okay. So this society is a not-for-profit society, was established in 1975. So we did about 43 years. Jaipur Foot was developed by, very interestingly, a master craftsman and a team of orthopedic surgeons in Jaipur. Because earlier the limbs were either made of wood or steel or aluminum, and none of them gave any reasonable mobility to people who had lost limbs. Sadly, in India and perhaps in most parts of the world, those who lose their legs are people who actually work on the roads. or people who actually have to make a living by hard work. And that had tremendous consequences on entire families. Man loses a limb, he's basically the wage earner, the entire family goes into a serious crisis. Idea was to, how do you bring them back to near normalcy? And that was the challenge which this master craftsman solved it by giving this flexibility. And if you don't mind, I'll just show it to you, because otherwise you'll never understand it. Which is not possible in any Western limb, except maybe a $100,000 limb which will have microchips nobody can afford. This flexibility. If you don't have this flexibility, you're walking like this. Obviously, then you just can't do anything. This flexibility was the one that was introduced in Japan. So it's a very high-tech product. Jaipur Foot and BMVSS, that's the society, the not-for-profit society, are now synonymous. And we have a special consultative status with the UN and etc., etc. Our philosophy, we are a purely humanitarian organization. So regardless of which country, which person, anybody who comes to either our center in Jaipur, which is our headquarters, or in the 23 centers spread all over India, they get every service free of cost. If they can't afford food, we give them food. If they can't afford a ticket, we give them a ticket. If their families can't afford to stay there, they stay with us. And in cases where we know that they don't have anything to go back to once they go back in terms of earning wages, we have special kits. For example, you can set up a tea shop in precisely 10 minutes by buying sugar, tea, milk, kerosene oil, and matchstick. That's it. And we give the whole trunk, and he's in business next day. And sewing machines and things like those. It's like this: give them mobility, but give them also dignity and employment. Otherwise, it's just job half done, and everything is free. So we are humanitarian, we are non-sectarian, regardless of any country, religion. Anybody who gets Jaipur limb is for free. It's non-political, and we are borderless. Our objectives: free of cost rehabilitation of handicapped all over the world. Our production, I'll just take a couple of minutes. This is important. Often, they'll say, oh, Jaipur Fort is cheap. It's not actually. It's very precise. It's precise to the millimeter, because if there's a play in where the knee joins, or here or here, you'll not be able to use it, because we start giving wounds. So this is the Jaipur Foot. That's where the main technology is, where you get this flexion, what we call dorsiflexion. This is the socket, it basically joins it, but again, it's very precise. This is the below knee fitment, and this part is made on the spot in any camp we do. So it's made precisely to the requirement of the person who's going to get it, because people have amputation at different places, thickness of their body is different, and it's important that they get it absolutely precise. This part. Okay. This is actually the same thing. This is the Stanford knee. The Stanford knee was developed with Stanford University of US. That's how we work, and they worked with us completely on pro bono basis. This knee joint was rated by Time magazine in 2009 as the 50 best inventions of that year. That's the only Indian product which has ever figured in this list. And this is the Stanford joint there. Okay. We are the world's largest organization for rehabilitation of what we now call physically challenged persons. Actually, we call persons with disability now. We're the world's largest organization. If we were divided into two, we'll still be the largest. If we're divided into three, we'll still be the largest, top three. And if we divide into four, we'll be the top four. That's the scale on which we operate. We have done 1.73 million now, a little old. It was about 15 years old. So we've done 1.73 million beneficiaries so far. Main work of rehabilitation is in India. As I said, we have 23 centers spread all over India. We operate, actually, as we talk, we have a camp going on in Uri, which is where you have fighting going on half the time. We have a camp going on there. We work in Maoist infected areas in India, and we had no problems. And we go without police protection. And actually, we feel very secure because they say we'll look after you. We are an international organization. We have done camps in 29 countries. We have done 69 camps. The last one was over about 4 weeks back in Myanmar. All the services I mentioned, and I repeat again, are provided completely free of cost to the beneficiary. So we get our fundings from private donations, individual or corporate, and occasionally from government of India and some states. That's how we survive. And fact of the matter is that somehow money comes. The functionality, and that's important. So I just request you to focus on this. As you would have seen in the videos, the person can walk, he can sit, and that's difficult. Squatting is not possible in any Western limb. In our limb, you can comfortably squat. And that's important for Indian conditions, but not only Indian conditions, for Oriental conditions. If you go to a temple, you sit on the floor. You go to a mosque, you sit on the floor. There's no way you can do it. Because our limb, what we call the Jaipur foot, is the only universal foot in the world, which means you can actually wear a shoe, you need not wear a shoe, you can walk, you can jump, you can ride, you can drive a car. For Western limbs, you have specific limbs for specific things. And we have a person who has actually climbed 18,000 feet on Jaipur limb. He'll come later. You can run, as you saw somebody, you can climb a tree, mountain, ride a bicycle, drive a car. You can practically do everything for a below knee amputee. For an above knee amputee, also you can do pretty much lots of things. That depends upon the health condition, etc. But you can do pretty much most of the things. Quality, as I mentioned to you, the thing that you make on the spot, the shank. You can run a car over it, it will not break. So that's how strong it is. It's made of, and it's made in the skin color. It's made specifically for us. So we work very closely with companies which develop these products, and often they are very helpful. They don't charge us much. That's how we are able to do all that we do with the very little money that we have. In terms of functioning, what happened to the, I think we'll have to dim the lights perhaps. Yeah. So he walks to BMVSS and crutches, and he actually works with us now. Actually, many of our workers are people who have got limbs with us, and now they've decided to work with us and help others. So he gets an artificial limb. Normal time, turnaround time is the same day. So you come in the morning, you're out in the evening. Except in complicated cases where you need to really give a lot of gait training, etc., you might have to stay for a day or so. Otherwise, you come in the morning, you're out in the evening. With the custom-made limb. He's running, and actually he can do a kilometer in 4 minutes, which I know I can't. And most of us, I think, in this room can't do. He climbs a tree, rides a bicycle. He is bilateral, which means he lost both limbs. He's walking. He's skating with artificial limbs. On the right-hand side, this gentleman has done 13 half marathons. He has gone up to heights of 18,000 feet, and now actually next month he'll be doing the Leh motorcycle ride, which is about 2,100 kilometers on a mobike. He's driving this mobike. Sudha Chandran, the lady you saw earlier in the. Okay, I'm pretty much finished now. Bharatanatyam is a very complicated dance form, but she does it with Jaipur foot. That's the only limb with which you can either sit in a temple or do a namaz. These are the places where we have done camps, but let me focus on Africa. Since that's the focus of today's event, we have done in all 19 camps in Africa, benefiting 7,700 people in 12 countries. Now, last year, Ministry of External Affairs signed an agreement with us under which they'll be supporting 10 camps every year for next 2 years, with this year and next year. Did I miss it out? Yeah, there was Sierra Leone also. It's one of those things. As I said, we don't even have great record keeping of the past. No, I know we have done it. No, we have done it actually on the copy that you have. The back of it, we have Sierra Leone also. This is Iraq. You've seen this. You've seen this. You've seen. This is the first lady of Vietnam, and this young boy. We did this camp 2 months back. He lost both the legs when he was 2 years old, and then he just wasn't mobile, and he was running in one day. I had the last word. Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, this is our foreign minister, and she was in Vietnam recently for the conclusion of the camp. And this young girl had lost her legs, and she was walking with her. Jaipur, UN celebrated a conference specifically in Jaipur Fort, 50 years of Jaipur Fort. This was on 15th May 2018, and this is the conference. New Joint I mentioned. This is the Time magazine, the 50 best inventions of 2009. Harvard Business School has done less than 10 case studies. They teach on the basis of case, just 2 minutes. Harvard Business Study actually teaches on case study methods. They've done less than 10 case studies on India. Jaipur Fort is one of them. And more than 4,000 people, Harvard University graduates have been taught this case study. We were with Harvard earlier this year, and this study was done in 2013. They want to revise the study because lots of things have happened since then. I think by next year we'll have another case study on us. IIM Bangalore has done case studies, etc. Stanford University did this thing for us, the Jaipur knee. And now MIT is working with us. We had a conversation with them. They are developing a better Jaipur knee with us, even better than what we have in Stanford. It'll take maybe a couple of years, but it's a work in progress. Okay, now just last 1 minute. Modalities of how we could establish a camp in any of the countries of Africa or anywhere else. This is what we request from our local partner, which could be government, which could be NGO, combination of both. Identify and enroll about 500 persons. Provide us about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet of covered space. Provide us some furniture to establish the workshop. Provide us with electricity, water. Arrange some local staff if required, and which is we think is important. That's our experience in the past. Provide local transport, food, and maybe accommodation for people who come from outside, because many of them just don't have the means to do it. Obtain approvals where necessary, and arrange translation facilities for BMVSS staff. Rest will take care. Thank you. Thanks. That's all for.
Thank you, Ambassador Mehta. And I know nowadays you are working on LED revolution in India. Now we are left with 2 other speakers. So I would like to request Dr. Shaktivel Selvaraj to tell us about Ayushman Bharat and PFI's collaboration. 5 minutes, please, Doctor.
Respected Chair, His Excellencies, my co-panelists. Since we are at the fag end of the session, what I intend to do in the next about 3 to 4 minutes is to provide the key highlights of the Ayushman Bharat, talk about the potential outcomes that can be expected, and then also explore how replicable this model to other resource-poor settings. So what's Ayushman Bharat? That's essentially translated in English, nothing but long live India. It has 2 components. The first component was announced earlier, essentially focused on primary care, transitioning these current sub-centers into health and wellness centers. Essentially, the focus there is to strengthen the primary care, both preventive, promotive, as well as curative care as well. In terms of strengthening the centers, their sub-centers, primary care centers, by having more workforce, medical supplies, and strengthening the infrastructure. But let me focus more on the other component, essentially an intention to cover a large segment of our population to provide access to secondary and tertiary care hospitalization. So a program that was initiated, announced last Sunday by the Prime Minister of the country. This is perhaps one of the most, I would say, ambitious program globally. Uh, and what's the key feature? Perhaps no other country, developed countries took about a century to become universal in nature, the health system. And this is going to be achieved in a short span of time. They're going to cover about 500 million people. So that's about 40% of our population. So that's one of the key highlight of this particular program. Of course, we are gradually moving away from the target approach to a universal coverage approach. One of the other key aspect of this program is the scheme is to essentially provide portability across the country, in a sense that anyone moving, given the fact that India has a large informal sector workforce moving from one part of the country to the other, and if they become a patient, they can certainly get benefit seamlessly across the country. That's the idea of Ayushman Bharat, that's PMJ. So that's in terms of the population coverage. In terms of the service coverage, what do the people get? In terms of essentially, the program is focused on hospitalization. There are about 1,300 packages going to be provided, free of cost, cashless. That's the kind of a procedure, all kinds of medical procedures and medical interventions. And of course, the cover is going to be about $7,000. That's about 5 lakh rupee for a family of per annum. So that's extremely, perhaps no other scheme in the country has ever had this kind of a benefit package. Of course, it provides a lot of choice element to patients. When patients perceive that there are poor quality in government setting, they can always step into a private sector setting to access care. So there is a choice element in the scheme. The third point is about the cost coverage. Now, India, despite the fact that we are now low middle income country with about $2,000 per capita per annum, but if you look at the India's health system indicators, India perhaps even now stands at perhaps one of the last in terms of not just outcome indicators, but in terms of financial risk protection. India, look at countries around the world, we perhaps would be spending one of the least in terms of public spending, that just little over about 1% of GDP. As a result of it, 75, almost 3/4 of India's spending on healthcare comes from households, from our own pockets. You and I end up paying households' pocket. That's just not the case across most countries around the world. As a result, what happens? 60 million people of our country, of our people, gets impoverished annually. And about 20% of our population, that's about 250, 300 million people, pay what is called catastrophic payment. So anyone who earns and pays about 10% of their income annually on healthcare, considered to be catastrophic in nature. That's extremely high for a country which wants to attain a development status. And therefore, the focus of this particular program is to provide financial risk protection, bring down households out-of-pocket payment, as a result, bring down impoverishment, as well as reduce catastrophic payment. And that's the idea of this particular program. And what are the potential benefit that one can expect from this particular program? Access to care is going to extremely accelerate in a big way, number one. Two, certainly, no doubt, it will certainly go about improving health outcomes and reduce mortality and morbidity in a substantial way. And of course, provide financial risk protection, as I said. Of course, there are other benefits that one can look. This is not a typical. If you look at most developed countries, they either follow tax-funded system or a social health insurance system. If you look at rich countries around the world, half of them follow what is called a tax finance system, like the UK, and most other countries, half of the rich countries follow what is called social health insurance model. But this model, the model that was proposed and initiated now, essentially takes a middle ground, in a sense that you give choice to people. Either they can go to public or private sector. But it is not a typical social health insurance system where employer, employees, and others end up paying. These are essentially going to be tax funded. The money comes from the government, but care to be provided by both public and private providers. That's the kind of innovation that we've come up with. This is just about 10 years old, and that's something that we're going to accelerate in a big way. I think I'll stop there with just one observation, given the fact that we are really running out of time. How replicable is this model across other resource-poor settings? Now, India and many countries in Africa share a lot of commonalities, not just in terms of GDP numbers. We have a huge informal sector. Our informal sector workforce is about 90%. That's true of many African countries. In terms of health outcomes, I think we again share a lot of commonalities in terms of high mortality rates, morbidity rates. In terms of health system, again, we share very similar nature of health system. Poor governance in the public health delivery system, a large private sector which is unregulated. That's something that this particular system, this particular program will try to minimize, if not totally eliminate. Hopefully, this can be replicable. This is not a rocket science. It's a simple model which I guess can be replicable in other settings. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Indeed, an amazing initiative and would be a game changer in the health sector as far as India is concerned. And we wish you all the best. As for Africa, we have seen that they are still trying to work out on infrastructure in the healthcare, and where Indian companies have a tremendous advantage and head start. Now we have the last speaker, but very important one. I have known the TCIL trying to do the Pan-Africa e-Network project, and in several countries where I was posted, we were trying to get that going. And now they are into the second phase of it after signing, which was mentioned by Secretary and Joint Secretary both. And we look forward to hearing from you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Respected Ambassador Trigunath Sahab, High Commissioner to Nigeria, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Being the last speaker is always a problem that you know what to speak and what not to speak, but everything has been spoken already. But I think he has set the stage. Most of you who are from African region would know TCIL. It's a public sector undertaking. The name itself speaks Telecommunication Consultants India Limited. We are a public sector undertaking under Ministry of Communications, Government of India. Formed way back in 1978 to take telecom expertise to the developing world. And Middle East and Africa and Southeast Asia were the main targets. Of course, we had done ICT projects in the developed part of the world in terms of manpower export. In Africa, being a technology company, we have been in countries like Ghana, where we have established a telecom network. In Sierra Leone, recently we have established the landline telephony system and integrated it with the wireless telephony there. In Ethiopia and Sudan, we have done a lot of telecom projects. Algeria, we are doing optical communication on the live wire conditions. In Zimbabwe and in Mauritius also we are present. In Mauritius, of course, we are present for the last 2-3 decades. We have been a technology company primarily belonging to the telecom sector. And if I look at the topic today, we have been put into the higher education and healthcare sector under the topic of economic cooperation, opportunities and challenges. Healthcare and education have always been an opportunistic area because the numbers are far more than what the system can support. So there is always an opportunity to do something better. Even if it is in a perfect condition, you still have scope to do more. And challenging because everybody, we being the human beings, right to education and right to health, we need certain facilities, but the expertise level is available in the urban areas, while the need actually is both in urban as well as in the rural areas. So how to build this gap of rural-urban divide in terms of reachability, in terms of connectivity, in terms of logistics. And that's where the technology comes in, and that's where TCL comes in. We have executed on behalf of Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, the first phase of the Pan-African E-Network project, wherein the Indian education through the Indian universities, the major ones, and the Indian expertise in the healthcare through super specialty hospitals were made available over the network to all African countries. 48 countries in phase one took the benefit, and we served through, I'm talking about 2009 to 2017 time, where we were still having an issue of connectivity in various parts of the world, including Africa. So satellite communication at that time was chosen to cover the whole of African countries, and we had satellite terminals in each of the country. These were specified locations in mostly the capital cities of the African countries. And about, if I'm not wrong, more than 20,000 students registered. Many of them got promotions, many of them got jobs, and many of them got additional degrees, whilst being in the benefit of or in the comfort of their own homes. About 6,700 lectures were taken on our continued medical education, where doctors, nurses, and paramedics in Africa had the benefit of Indian education in the health sector, and about 6,000 sessions, teleconsultation sessions, which were done between doctor to doctor. That means doctor on the African side would consult a super specialty doctor on the Indian side. And I remember to have one case where the live surgery was done in Senegal and the life was saved over the network, where the doctors on the other side performed with the specialties, super specialty doctors sitting on this side. Seeing the response and the success, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India extended now this same project, but in a little different fashion, in the sense that the close locational presence of the remote locations where students and doctors can come in and take the help of Indian education and health services now has been opened up, because the connectivity comparatively has improved. So we are going, or rather planning now, to go for internet-based connectivity, wherein the expertise will be still available from Indian universities and hospitals, and much larger in number as of now. Everybody, the giver on this side is also on internet, and receiver on the other side is also on internet, and they both are able to communicate with each other using the technology, what we happily now call as internet proliferation. We are trying to do, as Mr. Trimurti in the morning said, and Mr. Ravindra said, it's an ambitious project, and we are going to make it successful with all your help. And this time, since there is no locational dependency, only the internet connectivity is the question. We are even going to have multiple universities in a given country, multiple hospitals in a given country, and on Indian side also, instead of 5 earlier, we are targeting about 15 or so universities in India, and Symbiosis certainly can also join in. We have about 12 hospitals we had last time, and this time we are hoping we will have about more than 20 or 25 hospitals who would be using these facilities and benefiting African youth primarily, and the doctors and nurses and paramedical staff. This education and health services both are going to be on a free kind of a mechanism, where ministry is funding the course fees, but we are not limiting only to those, to the number of scholarships that we have defined. I think those who want to still go ahead and have the education and expertise level, they can still pay a nominal amount and get onto the board also. We had a session discussion in the morning, what is happening in terms of the medical side, where we talked about medical tourism, the difficulty in bringing the patient here, and a lot of times you actually have to do a lot of pre-analysis, the diagnosis, analysis, and then do an operate. And after you operate, there are a lot of checkups that are done afterwards. And every time bringing the patient back and forth with not that good connectivity between African countries and India directly, this technology can certainly play a major role. All the pre-operative analysis can happen on the net, where the doctor can talk to another doctor with or without the presence of the patient. You do operate here and then you go back, and then follow-ups can be done again on the network. And in phase 1 also, we did quite a lot of it, though numbers are not that encouraging. Reason being, we are 2 continents and the law of the land also has to prevail upon. The local patient has to be under the supervision of a local doctor, and super specialty consultations from Indian side can be given to the doctor if he so demands. Of course, this coupled with the other ITech program where we have doctor-to-doctor exchange programs, teacher-to-teacher exchange programs, university-to-university coordination. So that coupled together will give much more benefit and cooperation between the 2 continents and will increase the friendship and brotherhood among both nations. We're trying our best to use the technology to provide healthcare and education services, and not limiting only to, let's say, originating from India. The technology allows to do it from within Africa also if it so demands. So let's hope the second phase also is as successful, or rather much better successful, and gives much better reach to every nook and corner, especially to African countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Bharti. Thank you very much, and all the best for the next project.
Thank you.
Well, at this, I think that everybody was so very open. You want to have a question? Okay, please go ahead. Who do you want the question? Apollo Hospital, okay.
Okay, my name is Ajay Nobek. I'm a Kimiwanian by nationality. So I'm direct my question to the Apollo managing director. So I don't know, is it possible, because if you look at some of the top ranked universities here, I think that Africans are doing extremely well in the medical department. So since as Apollo is planning on maybe opening diagnosis centers in Africa, I don't know if it's possible. Maybe they can like partner with the universities around. Maybe like the students who come up, the top ranking African students, they can integrate them to the system. They maybe look like why they're opening the centers in Africa, and then it can just like transferring them to take over the charges on that side too. Thank you.
If I was a student working and studying in India, I would like to understand how I could return to my home country and take advantage of the growth that is happening. I don't think we are there yet, to be honest with you. We are still trying to find a foothold in Kenya, for example. So we are talking to Centum in Kenya to start a hospital there. We're talking to another hospital that is planning to open in December. Now, that is so far only been in the stage where we're trying to get an agreement in place. And as I think Mr. Bharti was mentioning that, there are the laws of the land that are there, and we are not able to cross a few of the issues, especially when it comes to medical doctors and pharmacists. I would love to do it, because if I have to make it successful, I need local talent there. I cannot import Indians or non-Indians. I need to have local talent there. What I will do is, I promise you I will put this on top priority, because my heart goes out to you. You are studying here. You're looking for an opportunity back, either in India or in your home country. And I would love to offer you a job if I could. And I'm working towards that. It's in both of our interests.
Thank you. Well, with this, I think we'll have to close this. Yes, please. The lady has the last word.
I was supposed to be one of the panelists, but that's okay. But I still feel that because it's a very important platform to highlight Indo-African cooperation, I just thought I would add a final bit to it, Your Excellency. My organization, Public Health Foundation of India, we have entered into a large number of MOUs with multiple countries across Africa. I just felt I had the right audience to mention that. Even while secondary care is coming up, even while hospitals will come up, there is still a huge opportunity to build the skill of medical professionals in different countries across Africa. So our organization has already entered into multiple master's programs, diploma programs in non-communicable diseases, hypertension, diabetes, all the ailments that the medical professionals, both formal and informal, struggle with in your countries and in our country. And therefore, I just took this opportunity to highlight that these are large training programs numbering almost 20,000 professionals will be trained over 5 years across Eastern countries as well as groups of Western countries. So I just think that this is an important initiative that needs to be shared, and we look for further opportunities with different countries to take it further. Thank you.
Very useful, madam.
To ask Mr. Ravindra a question. You see, the allocation of spaces by ITEC, it's done from the High Commission in Nigeria. And I asked my staff if if we are put in the loop, as to allocations on annual basis, whether we have a right to access to ask them, for the year, what are the chances available? Is it possible to get that information? I'm saying that because of what she raised now. Is it possible at mission level, please?
In most of the cases, the ITEC scholarship which we are offering is in the public domain. For example, Nigeria, we offer, if I recall correctly,
One that concerns the mission. Say, okay, in this 1 year, these are
we can look into it.
But
We have a
that's
database.
That's
Database
also
of,
available on the website.
yeah,
right?
maybe.
ITEC website, it's available.
The alumni
Excellency,
is there, but again, it is access. Access is an issue. This is something which we will take into account, and we will see what can be done.
But what happens is in the ITEC scholarships, the government changed some rules, regulations. I remember, you see 50% of the allotted slots are generally recommended by the host government, and ambassador has the power, our ambassador, to exercise his discretion for the remaining 50% of the slots. But you can, between you two, the ambassador from here, ambassador from there, can always recommend to him the right kind of candidates, but they have to go through the due process. Well, thank you very much, and I would like to express my gratitude to all the esteemed panelists. They have given an amazing insight into whatever potential and prospects we have with Africa, a very, very important partnership. At the same time, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Arvind Gupta, the director of the VIF, and Ambassador D.P. Srivastava for initiating, and of course, Dr. Neha Sinha for executing this conference, which will go a long way through its recommendations in making our relationship a great success story. Thank you very much once again for your patience. We have overshot